So Gurpreet, good to see you again. How you doing?
Nice to see you. Been a while.
It has. It's like we just said. It was the seventh marathon out of eight in London that you come along with your daughter, and yeah, you did some laps. So I was really grateful for you to come along.
Amazing. Still can't believe you did it.
I've just seen as well. You've got a London marathon place, right?
Yes, I can't believe it. I'm so excited. Like even I was talking to Johnny when you were doing, because we were waiting for you when we got there, right?
Yeah.
You were on half a lap or something. I was telling him, look, whatever's happening, I'm getting in somehow, and thankfully I have.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, I'm glad you got in because I know you've done the virtual one a few times.
Twice now, and
Right, yeah. And it's one of those where my friend I think's got in this year. It's like the eighth year of trying. So I know it's really difficult to get in, isn't it?
it's very difficult.
But yeah, no, let's we'll probably talk about running as well at some point today. But we wanted to just invite you on just to have a conversation because when we met on that marathon, it was like we already was having conversations about mental health and parenthood and being a dad, but equally, the different backgrounds that we've both got and the different challenges that come with that. And we wanted to keep it as casual as possible and just like hit record and see where the conversation goes. But I think it would be really good to just start with a little bit about kind of your experience, your journey, and whatever you feel comfortable to share, and a little bit about what you do now, because I know you do such incredible work in the mental health space as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a dad of four, so we've got two girls and two boys, and really from sharing my story on Instagram, like sort of 4 or 5 years ago, being a parent blogger, things really kind of began to change for me. So traditionally, I come from like work background in IT, so I used to work in the banking sector, and used to work in technology, and I was a father of two at that point, and it really started to kind of dawn on me what I was doing with my life. Because once upon a time, I thought, I'm going to be, climbing the career ladder, driven by bonuses and everything like that, these, career progression and everything like that. So I kind of hit my mid 30s and call it a midlife crisis or whatever you want to call it. But it was kind of dawned on me at that point. I thought, wow, if I spend the next 30 years of my life working in this bank, what would I have achieved? I'm going to get this great oil painting or something after 25, 30 years service. But in the world, what would I have done? And it really hit me hard. But like when you're in the rat race and, and everything like that, you get sucked back into it, don't you? And it kind of, the thought kind of went down and down, but it was still there. And I've had my own sort of mental health struggles, which we would talk about later, I'm sure. But I suffered from low mood and being emotionally drained for a few months back in 2013. So I managed to overcome that period. So that was kind of I had a knowledge of having something and being in the shoes of somebody who would be terrified of not knowing what was going to happen next and feeling you know, something internal where you just felt like everything was caving in from around you and not being able to speak to anybody about it and all this. So I had some experience there of that. So I was generally interested. And like I said, Instagram was a big thing for me because we're fathers. And I was looking at people, dads, because followed a lot of dads when I joined because I was parent blogging about fatherhood, and someone was showing I've got anxiety and I'm taking these pills for it, medication for it. I'm opening up today about my experiences. Some were talking about attempted suicides and things like this, and this was wow, like major alarm bells for me because I'm thinking to myself, I'm a father as well. I've got a family. They're fathers. They've got families. What's happening to their families when all this is going on? So it's kind of like that really brought about an interest in finding out about this. And it's one of those things where anyone will know when you start to find out about something new, you start to see it everywhere. And all of a sudden, I could see this everywhere, and people were coming up and talking to me about it and everything like this. And the interest began to grow from there. And it just happened so naturally. So Gurleen, my daughter, she started school, and I turned up there at the school like this open day, and they gave us all these leaflets, and one of them was for Mind. And I thought it said on there about becoming a volunteer, and I thought, oh, this looks like a good place to start. So literally, I just contacted them, and they were desperate for volunteers. So I became a mentor And through becoming a volunteer there, job became available, working within IAP services, and I just applied for it, and I could see myself, like I said, leaving that career behind and going into something where I was passionate about it, and I could see it being worthwhile. So I've been in sort of mental health services, for primary mental health care services, for 3 years now, and yeah, things just all change very quickly.
It's incredible. It's an incredible story, and one of the key things that sort of stands out to me, because I think a lot of fathers in particular can probably maybe relate to this, is that transition between the secure bonus, corporate sort of job that you had, to now this role working for a charity that is more purposeful and you're passionate about. I might be wrong here, but I'm guessing maybe there's like a financial sort of difference between the two as well. Yeah. And as a dad, it's sometimes we feel like we have to provide, we have to protect, and that can be a very difficult conversation to have with our family. Did you find that difficult? Have you always had that support from your wife and family to do what you want to do?
I just said I had a conversation with my wife naturally, because changing careers is not an easy thing to do, but I was really kind of, in my mind, it was like I didn't want my children to see me just paying bills all my life. Like my job pays the bills, it does this, that, and the other. I wanted them to see like me doing something that I really wanted to do. And that was really big for me. And I had a conversation with my wife, I got a very supportive wife, and she said, because again, it's one of those things where I said, we'll manage, right? I'll make it work, and everything. But obviously, naturally, there was a big wage cut. Working from a bank to working for a charity, of course, but the difference is, it's like, now I would run to work, like, whereas, and it was a big difference that I found at the beginning, right? So, when you work in corporate, you work in a bank or whatever, you sometimes come into work and you sit from the point of entering from the front door to sitting to your desk, you won't speak to anybody, you just put your headphones on and just bash away, crack on, right? And then when I started working for a charity, working for mine, soon as it would take me from the point I walked into the door, maybe half an hour till I get to sit at my desk, because everyone's like, how are you doing? And I wasn't used to that. I was not used to, I had to adjust to that, where everyone just wants to know how you are, what you're doing, and all these things. So that was a big difference for me.
That's incredible. And it's good that you had that support, because I'm guessing as well, like you mentioned it, it's a trap that a lot of people get into. I have friends who are in that trap, their families, their dads. I know a lot of people that are, where you get used to a certain amount of money, right? And you're providing for your kids. They're used to a certain lifestyle. And pulling away from that is very difficult, because as a father, we might say, we're not going to make them happy because now we can't pay for their, horse riding lessons. We can't do this. We can't do that. So where did your self-esteem come from to be able to say to your wife, we'll manage? Because I can really relate to that. My wife's very supportive. I've come up with like, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try that. I went from this business to now I'm going to talk about mental health, and there's never been any judgment. But I've always had this way of saying to her, and she knows I'll make it work. So where did your kind of self-belief come from?
I think, like as I said, with my wife, so she always knows that we make it work in the end. It's just that belief that I have, that, that faith that, when you're out there and you're going to be doing something with purpose, things will get taken care of for you. And that you have that belief where, you just you don't have that fear and that doubt, because like with children as well, and like they come with a destiny. I believe that when they're born, my mother-in-law said this to me, like, don't worry about when your children come to this world, because they're coming in with their own destiny and they're taken care of in ways that you just won't know about. And that's so true, because they are taken care of. It's like, you can have all these money worries, you can have all these other stresses, but they come on their own, and they're you manage, right? You get by, and you might have to make certain compromises and things like this. But now I was working locally, which was great, and that was the other thing. I said, look, I'm going to drop the kids off to school in the morning every day, which I wasn't able to do before, and different things like that. But it's just that you have that, that faith inside you, that so it's unshakable, that it's going to work. And the other thing is as well, coming out of working in a bank where everything is done for you, I've come out of my comfort zone massively because I've grown in so many different ways. And I'm doing lots of different businesses on the side as well now from that, and becoming my own boss and doing lots of other things, which I never would have done before because there just wasn't that opportunity there. And I saw that you posted something the other day when we were talking about your dad, and you said that after that, you basically, have always run your own business. And that's a big thing to do. It's a really, it kind of does set you free. And I'm sure you feel like that as well, that, and obviously it comes with its stresses and its ups and downs as well. But it's really something that when you step over the line and you experience it, then you don't want to go back the other way.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's like, I really want to touch on the faith element as well, because that's something that is a conversation I feel like we need to have. But equally, the reason why my first business was always about money, if I'm being brutally honest, but it was also very much about freedom. Yes. And back then, 2009, 2010, I'm sure you remember it. It was like seeing someone with a laptop on a beach making money. And I was like, wow, that looks cool, right? And I think a lot of me wanting to create freedom was because my dad didn't have that. Like, he was an engineer, leave house before I even woke up, came home, go for a run. I'd see him, then he would work in the evenings because he had like a side business as a physiotherapist. And my dad was very driven by money. He had a very strong work ethic. And when I thought about my dad, as I mentioned in that post, my dad was saving for retirement at 50. He took his own life at 45. And it was like, there was almost a rebellious side to me at 18, 19 after my dad of, I'm not doing that. Like, here I am in this similar role to you, like IT, everyone in an office, no one's asking me how I am. I don't want to tell them how I am. And I just needed to get out of that. And I think I was driven by that freedom. But even now with the business that I do, I feel like there's always, as you say, I'm still in gym stuff because I haven't had time to, haven't had time to have a shower. It's not as glorified as people make out. But at the same time, when you have that drive, that purpose, you'll always find the reason to get up in the mornings and that desire to keep making things work and keep going. And I guess that comes back to then faith as well, right? So with I really like what you said about faith. And in terms of religion, is religion something that, as a dad yourself, that's something that you focus a lot on?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we call it more like it's like a way of life ultimately, because religion sometimes, is kind of looked at in the world as being man-made, and it's looked at as kind of like something that you practice in certain places, which means that, you might go to a place of worship and you might be religious, but you might be different at work or at home. So it's more like it's a way of life, the Sikh way of life, we call it. So it's basically, it's ingrained. It's like your routine. It's like when you wake up in the morning, you brush your teeth, right? You just do that it's something you just do, right? And faith is exactly that. It's a way of life, but you're ultimately showing, your children that this is who we are, right? This is what we believe in. This is what we practice. This is our way of life. And within that, you're looking at what you're doing and how you're contributing to society, almost. But it's a key thing about everything is external, right? We believe, right? And we never look internally, right? And this is what our way of life is basically telling us, that everything is inside you. And this is where the biggest reflection point is, where you reflect on your emotions, your behavior, your actions, your thoughts, everything internally. And there's very little that can go on externally that can basically disturb us. It's all inside us. There's like another world internally where we know when you meditate and everything like that, you go inside. There's everybody knows, we've got mind chatter and everything like that. Internally, how we take things, it almost can be a conflict sometimes, because you're acting one way on the outside, internally you feel differently. So it's about getting in touch with your inner self. Ultimately, there is faith is a way of life, and that's that belief, that unshakable belief that we're not just kind of just going through life like that, like the spirit is just going like that. Yes, there's ups and downs, but we want to be rising all the time. Like our spirit wants to be rising. So this is where, like, you know, you're coming in with being a learner, improving every day, and, you know, trying to learn from your mistakes and trying to improve. And talk about a world where we compare everything, ultimately trying to be content with yourself, where you're not comparing yourself to anybody else. You're trying to improve yourself every day, to become better. And this is what we try to teach our children. And we've actually also got a community online of parents that we've been running for the last year called Seek Parenting, where we are trying to, our tagline is raising spiritual children together, where we focus on this a lot, because everybody's interested now in wanting this for their children all of a sudden, because it was different for you know, as you said, you know, your parents work all the time. Same with our parents, are working all the time to make ends meet. They didn't have that opportunity to sit down with us and say, you know, take time out, because they were paying the mortgage, they were doing all these other things that they were trying to do. That life was different then. Now we do, like I said, you've got your own business, you know, things like that. There is that little bit of time where we can sit down with our children, we can talk to them, we can find out what's going on in their lives, and you know, support them in what they want to do, and, you know, take them to these clubs and do all these other things with them that our parents didn't have the opportunity to do with us. So trying to incorporate and ingrain all of that, really trying to make it fun for them as well.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's really got me thinking as well, because, you know, whenever I ask a question around religion, I'm being authentic with you. I'm always like, I don't know whether I should ask it this way or that way. And it's like, do you treat it? Because I always say I'm not religious, right? I'm not religious. But equally, what you just shared there is very much how I live my life. And what I mean by that is I'm you know, the big thing that helped me when I was at my lowest was a lady called Anne, and Anne's very spiritual, Irish lady. And again, she got me onto, I'm sure you've heard of these guys like Wayne Dyer and Michael Singer and Sadhguru and people like that, right? And, you know, I was really, I don't know, I was really drawn towards that, and I still am, because I'm doing a lot of work around like surrendering and letting go, and, you know, working on the internal side, because what happens externally you can't always control. But I'm always battling, and I'm sure you know this as a dad yourself, I'm always battling with the external and the internal, right? It's like, I'm going to be this peaceful, let go, surrender to everything. And then all of a sudden there I am, like trying to control my kids that are having a little bite. And then I'm trying to like work loads because I've got to make sure that I don't lose this client. And then it's like bringing yourself back to it. So if you don't mind, it's a bit of a selfish question. How do you consistently ingrain that lifestyle into like what you do and as a parent? Like, is there certain practices that you use to constantly bring yourself back to that?
This is the thing. There's no, it's not perfect. As you said, there's always things that are going on. Life is happening where, you know, the philosophy that you have is tested all the time, right? Because, you know, you can get angry, you can lose your patience, you can do all these things when kids are being kids, right? You know, the kids don't understand you've got a Zoom meeting right now, and it's important because you've got client or whatever it is. And you need to kind of realize that, and it's taken me some time to realize that my children, however they are like that, and they're children, and you have to apply the perspective and some context on that they're at their level and in their shoes. So it's almost like looking at the world through their eyes, or ultimately, and what do they see, what do they feel about what it is that you're doing and what you're teaching them. And, you know, they want your attention, you know that anyway, they want your time. So it's nothing bad, that where that goes, but the key thing is like always reflecting on it. So things like journaling, and thinking that, not what I've learned as well is a big thing for me, not trying to you know, something happens, trying to resolve it straight away in my mind. Try and sit with it is the big one. You know, I'm training to be a coach at the moment as well, conscious parenting coach at the moment, family coach. And that's one thing that you hear all the time. People say, sit with your emotions. It's difficult to do that as a man, because you want everything processed straight away and dealt with, and nice and, you know, neatly, you know, dealt with, and it's difficult to sit with things. So something I'm learning with is sitting with things and not being in a rush to resolve things that have happened maybe, or how I've reacted to something or something that's gone on. sitting with it, and knowing that, and again having that faith and that belief that at some point I'm going to deal with that, whatever it is. I don't need to be anxious and stressed about dealing with something that's happened today, right at this moment in time, because I've got other things I need to do right now. When the time comes, that's going to sort itself out. And have that belief that you kind of, when you're ready to deal with it, you will deal with it. And not being in a rush, because that's the biggest thing I used to have before, and these needs to be processed now. Whatever's happened needs to be dealt with and acknowledged and kind of put to one side almost, so I can carry on with my life. But now I'm okay with these things. And the biggest thing that you said before was talking about meditation, right? We very quickly try and resolve things in our mind, because our mind is our friend, right? It's very helpful. It tells us what to do. It reminds us of things, right? So our body is connected with our mind straight away, because our mind is telling our body what to do, and et cetera, right? But inside us, we've got our soul as well, and we've got our feelings inside, how we feel things. You know, when we get butterflies, when we, you know, get pins and needles, when we get all these things inside us, don't we? So when something happens in our life where it affects our emotions, we feel it inside. We all feel it inside somewhere, and it's about trying to figure out where that's coming from, like inside us. And that comes with sitting with it and saying, look, you know, I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling whatever you're feeling. Where does that come from in your body? Where do you feel that? And home in on that. It's hard to do. It's not easy to do, but it's something that I'm feeling this here. Like, it's trying to resolve it. You can resolve it here rather than quickly, like whatever the mind is telling you, like and that's necessarily not the right thing all the time. We're reacting to things all the time. And the reaction is where, kind of, especially with the kids, when you react to the kids all the time, it takes so much more to bring it back every time, like a constant reaction. So these are some of the things. Again, look, it's not perfect, but that's acknowledging that as well, that it's not perfect, and that's okay. What does it look like? It's how it's meant to look like.
So true. Yeah, I saw something on your Instagram the other day that I really resonated with. I think you took your kids to the toy shop or something like that, or the supermarket, and one of them was kicking off and, you know, screaming and throwing a tantrum, and you could feel like those emotions rising of like, oh, what do I do? Embarrassment. And then you kind of, I think, sat with it, and, you know, and then it kind of like eased up, right? And you know, as a dad myself, I relate to situations like that. You know, I took all three of mine to Waitrose the other day, and figured out that my 5-week-old doesn't like the cold in Waitrose, and just scream the whole way around. And it's like, everyone's looking at me. They're like, oh God, they're probably, in my mind, I'm like, they're thinking to myself, does this guy know what he's doing? Like, you know, he's got to shut that baby up. That baby's too loud. Like, and all of this stuff runs through your mind, but actually it's just sitting with it, and it's, you know, being at peace with it. And almost for me, not fighting against it. It's like, just sit with him. He's going to stop crying soon. Get out of Waitrose. You know, give him a cuddle, and then he was fine. And something you just mentioned there, which is, I think, a really important lesson, and something that I'm still learning, is managing emotion. Because, you know, I was brought up by a dad who didn't cry, a granddad who didn't cry, right? So probably similar to you. So emotion's always been very difficult for me, and I'm very vocal about, let's talk about our emotions. Let's, you know, be vulnerable. But I remember when I lost my granddad a few years ago, and we went to his house with my wife, and she just looked at me and she was like, Paul, just cry. And I'm like holding it back. I'm like, no, I'm good. And she's like, you tell everyone to cry, but you're still not crying, right? And there's that moment I realized, you know what, she's right. It's like, I still struggle to show emotion. And what I then realized myself doing as a dad, and I'm sure you can relate to this, is when my kids were crying, I would want to stop them. And I don't mean stop them in the fact of like, shut up, stop crying, or stop crying, it's weak. I would never say that. But it was more like, solve it for them, like you just highlighted, right? You know, why don't we do this? Why don't we come and do this? Oh, you know, stop crying, it's going to be fine. Why don't we go out and play football in the garden? And it was like, I had to resolve it there and then. And what I realized is I'm resolving it there and then because I can't deal with their emotion. It's like, that's triggering something inside of me. I can't sit with that. I don't want to sit with that. I want to stop them, so then I feel better about myself. And actually, you know, I realized that was a massive mistake, because like when that happened to me as a kid, that had big impacts on me growing up as well. And I want to touch on something you mentioned at the beginning. I think it was what your mother-in-law said to you about every one of your children have their own destiny. I struggle massively with that. Like my biggest fear is that my kids will struggle with their mental health, and it sounds really drastic, sadly, take their own life. And it's because I'm surrounded by this stuff every single day. And I'm so conscious of like what my wife says to them, what I say to them, what's going on at school, that I almost, again, try and over control the situation, that sometimes makes it worse. So how do you really kind of remind yourself to know that your destiny is taken care of, that we can't do everything for our kids even though we want to?
I think just before I answer that, just go back to what you were saying, because I remembered something else with that pressure that you said. And I felt this as well, like with my wife, whenever she would talk to me just about how she was feeling, in my mind, I would think, I need to resolve it. How am I going to resolve this? Like everything, right? And sometimes I'd be quiet, and it's almost like she was like, are you listening to me, kind of thing, in that way. And then after a while, I realized that it was okay for me to just listen to her without giving a solution every single time, like we're programmed to, right? Find a solution, and to just sit with it, and that she sometimes feels better after being listened to as well, rather than me jumping in there trying to, fix everything. And what you said about the kids as well is really something I'm massively still learning as well. Before, I used to really care what people thought about me when I went out in the shops and the kids were just, being kids, right? And I used to be like, oh my God, like, what's going on in this shop and this, that, and the other, and stuff like that. And what you mentioned about with the emotions as well, it's like, it's not caring almost what people think about and judging you, because that's what you're feeling judged, that these people don't think I don't know how to control my children. And things like that. And then it's when you set yourself free from that, it's still difficult. It's not easy to manage a situation when your kids start rolling around on the floor having a tantrum and everyone's looking at you, and if you're thinking, if I just buy them this and that'll be enough, but that's not fixing what we call fixing, curing, where we need to connect with them. Like at some point we're going to connect with them, and we're going to make that breakthrough, and you're going to remind them. And like I said to him, look, when we came here, we decided that together you were going to get something like this, because this big Lego Avengers you're getting for your birthday from your grandparents. And it's like reminding him like that, to the point to connect. And they said going to his level and talking to him and trying to connect with him, to the point that, then his siblings got involved as well. And they were like, oh, you're trying to back me up as well, which was great, because that helped situation. It all kind of pull in one direction with it. It's finding that connection. But what you were saying there is about the destiny and everything like that. And yes, look, we would love our children to adopt all of our principles and everything like this, and live a life like we want to, and things like that. It's our responsibility. So it's your responsibility, it's my responsibility to be worried about them, to take care of them, to, provide for them, to nurture them, to do all of that stuff. It's our responsibility, right? But at some point we know that, they're going to go their own way and make their own decisions, right? And do their own things. So it's difficult, but you can look yourself in the mirror and say, I've done everything I could do. There's no stone I left unturned, ultimately. In the way, because we say as well, like people say to us, are you raising your children in faith? Like, what happens when they say, oh, I don't want to do that, or I'm not interested, or what are you going to do? Like they give it like it's like some sort of like drama from EastEnders, like some conundrum. Or what are you going to do? like, oh my God. And I'm like, look, I'll know that, look, we did everything we could while they were in our care. We tried our best, we're responsible, everything. And look, ultimately they made their own decision, and that's okay. It might be hard for us to deal with it, but that's our issue. We need to deal with that, whatever it is. And it's like, it's not saying that you don't care, and it's like you leave everything up to destiny and everything like that, but there has to be some point where you kind of back away a little bit and say, look, this was their destiny, or they were going to go in this direction. But almost like as well, that they can come back as well, they can change their mind, they can do whatever it is that they're going to do in their life. But yeah, knowing that as a parent that you've done as much as you can. We can always do more, but you tried your best. Whatever that looks like is different for everybody else, right? You try your best, and you let nature take its course ultimately, but you're always there for them.
Yeah, it's so true. And there's a quote that I heard, and it really made me think about how I was parented as well, which was when I was growing up, I didn't realize I was watching my parents grow up as well. And it was like, I remember thinking back to the times of my mum and dad. And I'm like, my mum's got all the answers. My mum was such a nurturing mum, right? And she was, you know, someone who was so caring for me and my brother. She'd take me to football. She'd take us to school. You know, she was so nurturing. You know, my dad, you know, he was a great dad as well, right? But equally, they both had their challenges. You know, my dad obviously was dealing with probably, you know, a mental illness that we didn't know about, which obviously led to his suicide. But also my mum, you know, she struggled with, you know, her past experiences and alcohol and things like that as time went on. And, you know, and I think back when I became a dad, and I was like, my mum was like 21 when she had me, right? Or 22. And I'm like, I remember being like 5, thinking my mum's got all the answers. She's like this hero. And she's like 26, 27 years old. It's like, she's still young and figuring stuff out herself. And it's like, I'm very vocal about that with my kids. I'm okay with being vulnerable, being like, I'm sorry, you know, I made a mistake here, or shouldn't have shouted at you like that last night. You know, I took a lot of stuff from work to home and I shouldn't have done that. And I think being vulnerable with our kids is really important as well, because I feel like they need to understand that, like, we haven't got it all figured out. They might think that we have, but we haven't. Is that something that you do as well? You're open to vulnerable.
It's something that that I love that quote, by the way. It's so true, and we are doing it now. But there's something that really hit me hard at that point. When you talk about that being vulnerable, I was doing, when I started my Instagram account, Sikhdad, every month I would do an interview with different Sikhdad. And one month there was somebody who said that their dad was their best friend, still now to this day. And I was like, wow, I was really intrigued by that. And he told me why. He said, my dad is still my best friend because when we were growing up, he shared his highs and his lows with us. And that really, like, I was like, wow, right in here. Like, when I was like, my God, wow. And who doesn't want their child to be their best friend, right? So I'm thinking, you know, how do we manage that? And this is the key thing, is you said vulnerability, to show, look, hey, my dad is human, right? And look, I've been a dad for 13 years now. You've been a dad for probably similar to that right now. And who told us then? Certainly didn't tell me that when a child is born, a dad is born as well. We just expected to, you know everything and do everything. And I do talk about this as well because, you know, I was figuring out, we'd only been married not long. I was figuring out how to be a husband and be a dad then. And I was, I never gave myself enough credit for it. Like, I learned how to change a nappy, learned how to bath her, learned how to do all these things, right? But I was still felt like under pressure. And I, as the years went on, I felt I was a bad dad. I didn't think I was that good because, like, you know, when I was like holding her, everyone was like, oh, you're not supporting her neck properly. You're not doing this. And I felt like, you know, my dad was like, oh, why are you changing a nappy for at the beginning and things like that. And I never gave myself any credit for those things that I did because of that sort of expectation. It's a really interesting one. But, you know, this is the thing, normalizing it with the kids. Look, you know, I'm into this now. I'm learning about this, and you share it with them. You know, you share with them what's according to their age, to make it interesting for them, to make them a part of your life ultimately, with that vulnerability as well. That, you know, you run your own business. You know, it's not, you know, you have good days and bad days. You talk about what those good days and bad days look like, not to the point where you're just dumping everything on them, like, to, you know, and leaving them with it, but just giving them like a bit of a snapshot of what your life looks like as well as hearing about what their day looks like and allowing them to be vulnerable as well. It's difficult because you want to fix everything as a parent as well. When they say, oh, look, I have an issue at school with someone, this is happening, is going on, and you want to, you know, because they're coming to you as well. Like, we went to our parents with, you know, we want answers straight away. And sometimes the answers aren't there straight away. And the learning happens over time. But with this as well, just to add this in there as well, like, I felt like my eldest, she's a teenager now, she's 13. So we're going through that phase. We have been for a little while as well, to be honest. And after a while, I figured out, look, when I'm going in there with my stories, she's just switching off. she's gone, right? And I thought, what? This isn't working, right? So then I was like, you know, when the situation comes, I had to back away from all these stories. Like, you should be grateful for this because you've got this and I didn't, you know, all this lot, right? You should keep your room tidy and everything like that. to the point that when she comes to me with something, I say, well, Dad, this has happened, right? What do I do here? Then you put those stories in. Then you put that wisdom in there, because she's coming to you and it's topical as well. She needs to know. That's when it has more of an impact, rather than you just every time like just saying, oh, you know, you should be doing this, you know, compare the comparison and things like that. You know, I learned that massively. And it's where you kind of, you let them be as well a little bit, as much as you can, but don't let them go too far. To the point that, because if you're always correcting them all the time, and you have to look at what your relationship is like with them. If your relationship is like you're always complaining to them, you're always telling them off, you're always, you know, you have to sometimes look at it from, and this is where you need to get advice to talk to other parents. It's hard to do that, I know, because you don't want to be vulnerable with other parents as well, and share with them, look, what are we doing? This is what we do as a community. We share with other people and say, you know, this is what we're doing with our kids. You know, what do you think about this? Why don't you do? Because there's so much competition between parents as well, which makes it difficult for the children, because the children are still young. They don't get that, oh, if I pass this exam, this is going to happen in my career. They're still 11 years old. They're doing 11 plus and things like that, where, you know, it's not about holding that information away from other people and saying, well, I want my child to flourish and be better than your child. This happens in communities where people are really close together. That's why online, on Instagram and other communities that we've got and things like that, that strength is there in strangers. That support is there in strangers, where you want your children and other people's children to flourish, other people's families to flourish as well.
And again, it's like vulnerability with other parents, isn't it? Like, you know, talking about your 13-year-old, you know, Freddie's 13 next month, and it's, you know, I'm relating to the stuff you're saying, right? And it's like, oh yeah, I'm the wisdom dad that comes in with like, right, let me embark some wisdom on you, son. But yeah, and then like obviously it's really difficult, because like you said, I love that about being their best mate, and that comes with like authenticity and vulnerability, because, you know, I feel like I do that pretty well with Freddie, but at the same time, I definitely am always like trying to, I think parents do, right? You try and mold them into something that you see as the right thing, but actually, as you say, it comes back to that letting go, having faith, knowing that they've got their own sort of destiny, and trusting in that. And yeah, I think that's a really key lesson for a lot of people, and it's very difficult to do because we want to control everything, right? We talk about this in the workplace, but also outside of the workplace, there's so much control that our minds are trying to latch onto. And I find still personally myself, the hardest one is being a parent. It's like that control that I feel like I need for my kids is far greater than work and everything else now. So it's like, again, that reminder of like letting go and kind of surrendering to what will be. And like you said, we're just doing our best, right? That's all you can do as a dad.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you're sort of custodian like of them, like you're this is in our culture as well. Service is very big thing. It's like it's close to like godliness, basically. When you're doing things for other people and not getting anything in return is a big thing. It's like in our DNA. It's a huge thing. And this is what we're doing with our children. We don't say to our children, oh, you know, I'm getting this for you, I'm doing this for you. And, you know, we do it as a parent, just out of the goodness of our heart, right? Because we do it selflessly for them. We don't even mention half the things we do for them, because we don't want anything in return for taking care of them. Ultimately, this is biggest thing that we're actually doing without even realizing. So we're actually doing so many selfless acts being a parent, because we're not asking them for anything in return, really. And when we do want things in return from it, this is a problem as well, because like we can take them out and, you know, spend hundreds of pounds on them on a day, and then when we get home they start misbehaving, and you're like, I spent 500, 600 pounds today on you, and you can't even behave now. You know, do you see what I mean? When we start on that exchange there, and we forget about the whole day that we spent out with them and it was great, we shouldn't want that in return. Like, we want them to behave all of a sudden and the whole day is ruined because they're throwing a wobbly in the car on the way home or whatever. So it's like, but again, look, I've been a dad for 13 years. I'm learning these things now. as well. And this is the key thing as well, that, you know, when you're going to be like, I look at my parents now, I'm sure, you know, with your mum and your with your wife's parents potentially as well, like grandparents as well. It's a different stage of life, isn't it? Like different relaxed time where like we will be there as well at one point, right? Where it's, you know, that you can get that enjoyment as well, to the point, you know, where you've done, and you're still going to, however old our kids are, right? We're still going to be like we, you know, with our parents and whatever, right? This, you still don't switch off from it, no matter how old they get. I'm sure everyone always tells us that, right? That I've got children older than us. They always say the same thing. You're still always going to worry about them, right?
Yeah. I still text my mum every day. She still texts me every day. It's like, yeah, it's so true. I've got one more question to ask you, actually, because it comes back to kind of a lot of what I try to do, but there's a lot of emotions and feelings that come with that as a dad. And that's looking after yourself. So, you know, what do you do to kind of look after yourself, your own mental health? And how do you kind of deal with the potential feelings of guilt and selfishness that come with that? You know, again, I always share a story in one of my talks. Like I go for my run in the morning, or I'll go for a walk, or I'll do something for me, headphones in. It's important that I'm staying on top of my mental health. And Teddy, you know, my 5-year-old would be like, oh, don't go for that run again. You're always running, right? And it's like, oh, pulling on your heartstrings of like, oh, and then you're running and you're thinking to yourself, yeah, maybe I'm not a good dad. Maybe I shouldn't be running as much as this. Maybe I should be spending time with him. How do you navigate through a lot of those feelings?
So what I'd normally do is like in a work week, like Monday to Friday, that's my main time to, you know, when I get time throughout the day to do things for myself, to take care of myself in a way where, you know, I'm always trying to like personally develop as well. And that can get tiring as well, because I know you're into that as well. You can want a break sometimes. You need a day off from, you know, expanding, you know, and putting it out there to the universe and things like that. But I'm generally interested in self-improvement, personal development, and, you know, reflection, and learning about mind, body, and soul, everything, educating myself to have a, because I've really got that now, whereas I didn't have that before. I was just very happy just floating along in life, and all of a sudden, and you know as well, when your mind shifts that way, it doesn't come back, right? It's going that way now, so it's like full steam ahead that way. And you know, I have to be honest, I've stopped watching a lot of TV. I used to watch a lot of football, like match after match after match. Yeah, I've stopped doing that now, because my time is spent elsewhere in doing other things. But you know, like you said, with running as well now, so like, you know, I've got my 16-week plan now for the marathons. It's 16 weeks away, right? So I'm thinking, how am I going to fit 4 or 5 runs in a week now, all of a sudden? Because I do the park run once a week, I'll be honest with you, right? And I'm thinking, how am I going to fit this in now as well, on top of all these other things that I'm doing as well, right? And there's the guilt there, because then you're not spending time with the children and things like that. But ultimately, if your candle's not lit, you can't light their candle in that way. So if you're not taking care of yourself, you're feeling drained, you're feeling exhausted, you're feeling, what's the point of everything? Because that's what happens eventually when you just get, and maybe you need to take a break if you're feeling like that. But if you're kind of thriving, yeah, and you're kind of, you know, you have that energy about you, then they pick up on that as well. It's infectious as well. So I'm always conscious that I need to be knowing more every time, and giving them some of that as well, making them a part of that as well. But the guilt is always there. But I think, you know, like family time, before I used to look at family time as, you know, mummy days, daddy days. We take them out, we spend the whole day with them. And this is what that is classed as. But, you know, like when we're just at home, that's also family time as well. So it doesn't have to be like, yes, we do organized stuff, but that's important as well. So I think that whatever time you do have with the kids, right? Because everybody's setup is different. So we're talking about it from a marathon point of view. Like some people that in their life, they might be single, they can come home, they can eat right, they can run, they can do everything is in a tick box, like in a pocket, right? But our life is not like that. We can't compare ourselves to them, right? We have to fit in wherever we can, right? And if that's at 9-10 o'clock at night going for a run, then that's so be it, right? You know, and you, when you need to be relaxed about that, and I try to be relaxed about that as well, and know that not to get frustrated. So I basically leave my weekends as no schedule. Like if I can do my habits, if I can do my whatever it is, my journaling, my whatever it is that I do, yeah, as part of my routine, fantastic. If I can't, then I'm going to go back to it on Monday. And know that, you know, like it's not always going to be like that. Your life is not always going to be like that. And you need to allow for that, especially with your family. But the guilt side of it is always going to be there. It's all the doubt, the fear is always going to be there as a parent. Imposter syndrome, all of these things, they're always going to be there. But I think everyone's got their own way of coping with it, their own coping mechanisms. So whatever works for you works for you. Whatever works for me works for me. And, you know that you're ultimately, like I said, that energy that you have around them is the key thing for me. That they always know, like when they get to that age, like my eldest knows what my dad's into. And the others will know as they grow up as well. What's he like? What is he, you can't hide that from them. Yeah. So that's what, again, look, I'm still learning as well. Look, I'm 39 now, so I'm going to be 40 next year. So see what that brings, right?
Yeah, it's so true. And I'm glad you said that, because it made me think about how I often beat myself up if I'm working a lot, or, I'm out running, working a lot. But every majority of nights for the last, I don't know, few months, I've put Teddy to bed, my 5-year-old, and we've a little joke around, and we've had that little conversation, and and I've sat at the top of the stairs as he's like, trying to go to sleep. And it's those little moments that you neglect that you're being a dad, because it's like, oh, but I've seen this other dad on Instagram who's just took his kids to this theme park and done that, right? So I think it's like recognizing those little moments of like when we're with our kids and how quality those times can be. But then secondly, like, again, and I'm dropping loads of quotes here, but there was a quote that I read, which was, teach your kids by what you do, not by what you say. And I think it was my 5th marathon out of the 8 in Birmingham, and I was like really struggling running up all these hills. And I remember just having my dad in my mind. But what I had in my mind of my dad was him just running up hills. Like I used to watch my dad run every weekend. My mum would take us, he would run. He was like an incredible runner. And just seeing him run up hills, run like all the time. Not for 1 minute did those wisdom conversations with my dad kick in, like what you just shared a minute ago, right? It's like, never through that moment did I think about that piece of advice that my dad gave me, or that statement that my dad made. It was always like what I saw of him. And it's the same as my mum, like how caring she was and how giving she was to other people. So like, I think you've just highlighted there, it's like if our kids see that, it's infectious, isn't it? Like they're seeing us like look after ourselves and do a job that you love and give to people. That's far greater than living in a job or being in a job that we're miserable about. Not looking after ourselves, having time with them, but not making it good quality time, I'm sure.
Children see, children do, isn't it?
Yeah, so true. I could have a conversation about this loads, to be honest, but I'm conscious of time because we've only got 2 or 3 minutes. But if possible, just to wrap things up, could you share a piece of advice that you've been given in the past, or you've heard, or you've seen, or whatever it could be, that's just really resonated with you?
I think I've got 2 just quickly short ones, but one's is always be yourself and don't do something just because somebody else is doing it. The key thing is, for me, I grew up a lot conscious of what was going on around me, and I was never myself. It was only when I kind of got, I discovered my faith a little bit, and then I got married after that. My wife kind of, I felt that she was with me for who I was, and that allowed me to kind of accelerate my own sort of personality. So always be yourself. It can be difficult at times when you're around certain people that don't allow you to be yourself, but I would persevere with that, because you will find the people to be around that take you for who you are. Ultimately, the other thing is as well, anybody who's going through something difficult, I've been through something difficult, other people have as well. And the amazing thing is, once you get through that stage, you have a new sense of fearlessness, a new sense of belief, a feeling that you can achieve anything. And I would never wish the bad times on anyone. I would, if I could, I would take that out of what happened to me. Yeah. But through that is how I've actually been able to change and improve and do everything I do today, is because of that reason. because of what happened there, because that showed me that I had the strength to get through something so difficult. So anybody who's ever gone through something difficult is basically, and you look at all the people you've spoken about, anyone who's achieved anything, if you look at them, they've always been through that time. I think it's J.K. Rowling or somebody said that when you hit rock bottom is the best foundation to build yourself up from, something like that. But when you hit that place where you're like, oh my God, this is, whatever it is, if you can navigate that somehow and get through that by just thinking of the one thing that's going to basically spark something for you, the person you're closest to, or the thing you believe in the most, or whatever it is, one thing that you can believe in, or you don't have to believe in it that much, something that gives you some sort of joy, or whatever it is that you can build up from again, is really important. But I can't stress that enough, that literally once you can ride that period out, get through that period somehow, that after that it will really change things for you.
Yeah, I love that. So good to have a conversation with you again, and we need to carry this conversation on. But where can people find out more about you? Obviously, your Instagram handles, all of that jazz.
Yeah, so Sikhdad on Instagram mainly. From there, you'll see like the link tree and everything. So everything is there. So
I really appreciate your time, and like I say, we'll have to catch up again soon.
I definitely really appreciate time. Thanks for having me on.